Even Velzard doubted her own eyes. She knew Rimuru was amazing. Not only her younger siblings, but she herself had been indebted to him. That was why she had decided to side with Rimuru over her older brother. Even so, the odds of winning were low. Therefore, even if victory was impossible, she had resolved to fight to the bitter end without giving up, to demonstrate their will. And yet, before she knew it, events had shifted into a one-on-one duel between Rimuru and Veldanava. Moreover, it had turned into an astonishing situation where they were evenly matched. She had planned for them to defeat Ivorage, regroup, combine everyone's strength, and strike a retaliatory blow, but Velzard's strategy had already collapsed entirely. However, that balance tipped easily. Veldanava was, as expected, unmistakably God. He switched to an indefensible attack, ignoring all authorities and abilities to directly steal the soul. This would likely defeat even the true dragons like Velzard in a single blow. The magnitude of energy, the strength of attack or defense, none of it seemed to matter before Veldanava's divine act of ignoring all laws to obtain only the desired result. Since the ego and one's powers reside within the soul, having it stolen meant immediate defeat. As proof, Rimuru himself had been defeated once. He fought hard, but I suppose it was impossible after all. Just as Velzard thought this. To her shock, Rimuru stood up as if nothing had happened. An existence moving solely on ego, without a soul. Such a thing deviated vastly from Veldanava's design philosophy. It's impossible, that was Velzard's honest thought. And then, Rimuru declared that he would take on Veldanava himself. Since his soul had already been stolen, that specific attack would no longer work on him. That must be his reasoning. He had warned the others to evacuate, seemingly believing he would be fine as long as he wasn't touched, but Velzard was exasperated, wondering what basis he had for that confidence. True, direct contact is the most effective way to influence information particles within a suspended world, but no. It implies that my brother is not omnipotent. Since he discarded his omniscience and omnipotence to arrive at this point, not everything goes according to his will. That must be it. She had resigned herself to the idea that he was absolutely unbeatable, but that wasn't the case. As proof, Veldanava was flustered. Although his emotions did not waver, the fact that he resorted to a surprise attack on Rimuru proved it. If he were truly God, an overwhelming existence, he should have crushed the enemy of God head-on. Instead, he tried to settle the match by exploiting an opening suggesting that Veldanava himself viewed Rimuru as a threat. An existence impossible within his design philosophy that meant Rimuru existed outside the scope of his imagination. Rimuru, a singularity defying all standards, harbored a danger capable of destroying even a god. And that Rimuru was absolutely furious. Because of Veldanava's surprise attack, the subordinate who shielded Rimuru had been injured. I believe his name was Benimaru. Rimuru is gentle, but he detests seeing his comrades hurt more than anything. He endures things when they happen to him, but perhaps he is sensitive to the pain of others. Brother, you may have just made a colossal mistake. Rimuru himself was unharmed, but that only made the problem worse. All hesitation had vanished from the enraged Rimuru. Where various emotions had once flickered, now there was only pure anger. It felt as though his purpose, his duty, had been set in stone. Now, all that remained was to await the judgment. Velzard would see this through to the end. To do so, the only thing she could do now was... Good grief. I don't know how effective my powers will be within this suspended world, but... Velzard exerted her authority to its limit, applying it to the defense of those gathered there. Precisely because all movement had stopped, she executed a complete fixation to prevent them from shattering. With this, they should be safe from most attacks unless they take a direct hit. Hoping this was the case, Velzard fulfilled her true role as a goddess of protection. Milim, too, had noticed Rimuru's anger. Unlike his usual laid-back demeanor, it was rare for Rimuru to get this serious. As I thought, it's scary when you make Rimuru angry. To Milim, Rimuru was far more important than Veldanava, a father she felt no real connection to, even when told who he was. Honestly speaking, Veldanava getting on the bad side of a Rimuru like this was nothing short of reaping what he sowed. In the first place, while Rimuru often gets scolded, he rarely gets angry himself. He yells at Veldora constantly, sure, but even that is just like playful bickering. Incidentally, Milim gets scolded from time to time as well, but since her Milim brain only retains convenient memories, such facts have been long relegated to the far side of oblivion. But setting that aside for now. Examples of Rimuru genuinely getting angry included the war with the kingdom of Farmus, and the time Veldora was dominated during the battle against Valgrand. There had been a few other instances, but they all shared a common thread. When Rimuru snapped, he stopped caring about the methods he used. Rimuru normally tried his best not to flaunt his power. He was kind to the weak and preferred dialogue. Conversely, he despised resolving matters through violence. Even when it came to a fight, he rarely went all out. It was incredibly rare for him to utilize his authorities to their full extent. He had gone so far as to voluntarily seal away skills he deemed too powerful. But when that same Rimuru snapped, it was a different story. The myriad of extremely dangerous authorities kept in check by his reason were released without a shred of hesitation. Indeed, even Milim couldn't fathom the depths of what the current Rimuru was capable of. Her memories of when she had gone into a stampede were hazy, but she remembered Rimuru handling it flawlessly, gently ensuring Milim wasn't hurt, while remaining strict and precise. If Rimuru had been serious back then, I probably would have died. With the justification of removing a global threat, no one would have complained if he had destroyed her. Yet, Rimuru absolutely refused to take that option. Seeking the best possible outcome until the very end and never giving up, that was who Rimuru was. Even so, Milim thought, how did he become so strong in just a few years? Less than 5 years had passed since Rimuru was born as a slime here in the Cardinal world. Yet, the balance of power in the world, including the development of civilization and cities, had changed drastically compared to before his birth. In this world, survival of the fittest is the absolute truth. It wasn't that the weak deserved to die, but being tossed about by the logic and desires of the strong was, in a sense, natural and unavoidable. However, Rimuru had cast a stone at that conventional wisdom. Believing that everyone had value and wanting to create a system where anyone could contribute to society, he had taken action to make it a reality. Even those who initially dismissed it as a pipe dream were eventually swept up in his ideal. The important thing was proper boundaries. Respecting the other party's will is important, but if values simply do not align, it is equally important to keep one's distance. Just as humans and monsters could sometimes join hands, there were also times when humans fought humans, or even monsters fought monsters, in hatred and conflict. In a predator-prey relationship, getting along is impossible to begin with. In such cases, he steered them toward mutual consideration from the start, ensuring they did not infringe upon each other's principles. Basically, Rimuru welcomed all who came to him. However, he hated having opinions forced upon him. He accepted the existence of various opinions and perspectives as diversity, but he believed it was wrong for one side to claim they were absolutely correct. We think this way, but you seem to think differently. In that case, let's keep our distance from one another. That was Rimuru's stance. If the other party persisted in pushing their claims beyond that point, he would have no choice but to step forward. Specifically, this meant cases like invasion by another country. If it were merely a loss of economic profit, he could endure it. If it followed international rules, holding a grudge would only be pathetic, even if he lamented his own lack of power. However, if they tried to bring their own domestic rules and force them upon another nation, then there is no way to settle this other than war. It was a perfectly logical conclusion, one that even Milim could understand. Furthermore, showing consideration to an opponent invading to steal wealth was a waste of time. Rimuru was thoroughly pragmatic in that regard. He was kind within his limits of tolerance, but the moment a line was crossed, he became ruthless. His power existed for such times, but it also served as a deterrent. The point was that military strength was absolutely necessary to protect what was precious. Rimuru accumulated power not for his own sake, but to protect everyone. In contrast, what about Veldanava? Milim didn't know what he was like in the past, but the current Veldanava was the worst. Power without ideals is empty. Rimuru had apparently said that once, and those words seemed to describe the current Veldanava perfectly. Milim loved Rimuru dearly. She was also quite fond of Benimaru, who always looked after others. So now, she would root for Rimuru. Especially since this time, the world would be destroyed if they didn't resist. Putting personal feelings aside, it was only natural to side with Rimuru. Rimuru would likely steal his resolve. And once that happened, Rimuru himself might not be able to stop. He seemed to have regained some reason with Ramiris' arrival, but with Benimaru still in critical condition, the situation remained unpredictable. So Milim, too, secretly steeled her resolve. If Rimuru were to lose control in his rage, then it would be Milim's turn to stop him. Hang in there, Rimuru. Hoping for a future where everyone could smile together, Milim prayed for Rimuru's victory. Chloe realized that there was nothing left for her to do. As long as time remained stopped, her cheat-like authority, Time Leap, would not activate. Since she could not recall memories of the future, the events to follow were an unknown quantity. That uncertainty was the norm, but in a conventional battle, none of her usual methods would apply. Chloe had painfully realized this through the previous battle. Now, everything depended on Rimuru's inherent strength. Even so, Chloe pondered. She had believed that the essence of a person was defined by the state of their soul. And yet, what about Rimuru? Even though his soul had clearly vanished, he remained active with perfect composure. It was completely abnormal. His strong will appeared to shine with a dazzling brilliance. Chloe was captivated by that light. In this situation, which should have held nothing but despair, she felt her anxiety strangely fading away. The countless tragedies Chloe had repeated. This moment was the culmination of overcoming them all. She couldn't see what lay ahead at all, but she had made it this far. From this stopped time, she could not return to the past. If Rimuru lost, everything would end. But if it's Rimuru-san, I feel like he will manage something. It was a conviction. She had repeated time again and again, seeing futures where Rimuru vanished and perished. Yet, even so, Chloe had never once seen a scene where Rimuru clearly died. Even in futures where he was thought to be dead, she had even experienced being saved by him later on. In other words, the idea that Rimuru had died was nothing more than a wrong assumption on Chloe's part. Someone who exists solely through will, despite lacking a soul. If such a thing were allowed, then all of her observed results would be overturned. If that were the case, then perhaps in those countless other futures as well. This current phase might effectively be the end of this world. However, time would move again, and a path to reach beyond it still remained. The intense light radiating from Rimuru. It was proof of a strong will that had not yet given up on the future. That was reason enough for Chloe to believe in Rimuru. Rimuru would definitely win. And beyond that victory lay a shining future. Believing this, Chloe waited for Rimuru's victory.